Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I am doing a coloured pencil portrait and this is part 1, so we're going to be focusing on drawing the eyes, nose and the mouth. So for you guys over on Patreon, I'm going to be uploading the real-time tutorials for this all this week, and if you're not sure what Patreon is but you want to get access to these tutorials, then basically I have 15 real-time tutorials a month for just $5 over on Patreon. Also, if you want to know what materials I'm using when I'm doing this piece, then I've put all the materials and where you can find them in the description below as well. Anyway, let's get on with the tutorial. Okay, so I'm starting off with the eye, and the first thing that I always like to do with coloured pencils is I like to block in the darkest area first. And so I'm using the colour Sepia, which is a dark brown colour, and I'm using the Caran d'Ache Luminance coloured pencils. And I'm just using that sepia colour to block in the darkest portions of the eye. So as you can see in the reference photo, the darkest parts tend to be the crease of the upper eyelid, the eyelashes, the pupil, which I'm also using a bit of black for, and also the shadows in the iris. I'm now moving on to the white of the eye, and the common mistake a lot of people make is they don't do a lot of shading in this and they just leave it like a white colour. And really the white of the eye has got some pink tones, and it also has quite a lot of shading with grey tones as well. Now moving on to the iris, and even though in the reference photo her eye looks quite brown, in real life it's really green, so I've added in some green tones as well. And I'm just looking at the iris and I'm using the shadows and the highlights in the iris to identify what types of colours that I need to put down, and I also use the white to lighten up certain areas. So now I'm moving on to drawing the skin, and for cool tone skin I really like using the burnt sienna colours, and then for warmer tone skin I like to use burnt ochres. Also for shadows I find the raw umbers really good as well. So I'm just layering these colours, and one thing that you want to try not to do is burnish too early. So when you're building up lots and lots of layers, don't apply too much pressure onto the pencil. And a really good way to help limit the amount of pressure you're applying onto the pencil is to use your hand a bit further back on the pencil, and also try to use the side of the pencil rather than using it directly vertically onto the paper. So only use a lot of pressure if you're going to your final layers and you're trying to blend everything together. So as you can see, I only apply a lot of pressure when I want to try and blend the colours together and the layers together and get a really smooth finish. And to do that, I like to use the white coloured pencil or a lighter coloured pencil. So I also added a colour called Anthraquinoid Pink, which I think is a really great colour for making the skin look vibrant and adding a nice healthy glow to the skin. And as you can see there, I'm just using the white pencil and I'm making sure it's really sharp so that when I burnish I can get everything smooth, because I can get into all the little white grain of the paper. You can layer a few layers on top once you've burnished, but you need to bear in mind that if you start adding lots and lots of layers when you've burnished, it will start to scrape some of the coloured pencil off and it won't really look smooth anymore. So I just wanted to say that I know this eye looks really quite shiny and reflective, and it makes it look a bit grainier than it does in real life, and I was really annoyed because I only seen once I've done the footage that it actually looks quite reflective. So I'm going to leave a card up above because I've done some other coloured pencil eye tutorials which is a lot clearer with the footage, so you can go and check them out if you want to, and I've got like 4 pairs of eyes that I did tutorials on. So now I'm doing the eyebrow, and the first thing that I like to do is I like to actually block in skin underneath where the eyebrow goes, because if you look at child's eyebrows, they tend to have quite sparse eyebrows or really light eyebrows, and you can normally see some of the skin underneath. So I like to block in general tones for the skin first, and then I go and add a few little eyebrow hairs. And as you can see now, I'm using a crafting knife or an X-Acto knife, and I'm just using that to pull out some highlighted hairs and some details. And you can do that in other parts of your drawing as well, like I'm doing with the iris. So when I draw eyelashes, I actually like to use the Faber-Castell Polychromos. Okay, so now moving on to the nose, and again the first thing that I like to do is block in the darkest portions with that sepia colour. I find that it's a lot easier to block in the darkest colours first because it shows you where all the other values need to be at because you've got those darkest areas in. So it helps you judge all of the other values. So now I'm moving on to adding the shadows and I'm building up the foundational structure of the nose. And to do that, I like to look at the reference photo and pick out a few key colours and use that to build up those shadows and those base tones. For this, I'm using the brown ochre 10% and also the burnt ochre 50% because I found that her nose is quite warm toned, and so I like to use those colours to help build up some of the shadows. I like to use the burnt ochre 50% for some of the deeper shadows as well, like by her nostrils and on the underneath of the nose. And again, I'm just using really light pressure and I'm trying not to burnish at all onto the paper. If you need to go darker with your pencil, instead of pressing harder, try to pick a darker colour in that range. So if the burnt ochre 50% was not getting dark enough, then I'd switch over to the burnt ochre, which is a darker shade. So now I'm adding some burnt siennas over the top and I'm just starting to build up the tone because you want to add lots and lots of skin colours to try and make it look realistic. Otherwise, if you just use a couple, it might look flat, and really the skin has a lot of different tones to it. So now, as you can see, I'm starting to apply a bit more pressure, and you can tell because I'm holding the pencil right towards the front and I'm also using it quite vertically. When I blend, I like to use circular motions so that it helps blend all of the layers together and it gets into all of the crevices of the paper from all of the different angles. And I'm always making sure that I'm keeping my pencils really sharp. So a few of you guys have been asking what sharpener I've been using to get my pencils so sharp, and so I've been using the Derwent Superpoint manual helical sharpener, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And I've only had it for the past month, but it is really good and it never breaks any of my pencils, and it can be used for charcoal and graphite as well. So now I'm just blocking in some more of that skin tone. As you can see, I've left the highlighted areas quite plain of any colour pencil. I haven't added much pencil. So I'm just going to use the white to get those highlighted areas. So just keep building up those tones. Take your time. It took me about an hour and 20 minutes to draw just the nose. So it does take a while. And as you can see now, I'm using that white pencil to help burnish that area and get those highlights really bright. And I'm also using it to blend out the skin around that highlighted area as well. You can also use it to brighten up some of the areas to get the little highlights. I do recommend, even if an area is really bright, don't just use white on that area. Add a bit of cream tone or some lighter tones and then use the white to blend it out. But make sure it has a little bit of value, because even though it's highlighted, I still added some cream tones as well. So what you see me do just there is I just erased some of the colour, because when I drew the eyes and the skin around the eyes, it kind of, now that I want to blend that skin area with the skin of the nose, I just lifted it slightly so that I had a clean patch to work on and I could just merge those two areas together so it was a seamless transition. So now moving on to the mouth, and as you can see, there is quite a lot of pattern to the way that I like to use my colour pencils. So again, I used that sepia colour and I used it quite lightly towards the middle of the mouth, and then at the corners and right in the center I applied some darker areas and I applied a bit more pressure. And now I'm working on the skin between the nose and the upper lip. Again, I picked out some of those base tones, so that brown ochre 10% and the burnt ochre 50%. I will leave a list of all the colours in the description as well. And then I'm layering over some burnt siennas. And I'm using the burnt sienna wherever I can kind of see that pinkish tone to the skin. So I'm also layering some more burnt ochre, and I just like to switch between the colours, and just whenever I think that I need to add another colour, or if I notice something, I'll just go and I'll add that colour, and I will layer and layer and layer until I'm happy with the tone, and then I will blend everything together. Now I'm using the burnt ochre 10% and I'm using that with a bit more pressure to help softly blend everything together. I find that the burnt ochre 10% is a really good colour for blending out, and as well as the white. The white is great for blending out the skin as well. I'm also adding some burnt sienna 50% and some of that anthracenoid pink, which I really like to use. So a few main tips for colour pencil drawing is always layer and never apply a lot of pressure until the end. Always keep your pencils as sharp as possible and try to use circular motions rather than back and forth lines, because this will help get that seamless, smooth skin that you want, and it will just make everything look really seamless, because you don't want to see any really harsh pencil strokes showing through. And I also recommend changing where you're holding your pencil and the way you're holding your pencil in order to limit the pressure. So I'm just blending all that skin out with different colours to make it really, really smooth. And now I'm moving on to the lips, and the first thing that I did was I added a base layer of that anthracenoid pink, and now I'm adding some burnt ochre and then some more of that anthracenoid pink and also a colour called russet. And as you can see, I'm just layering, and the more you layer, the more it will naturally blend all together anyway. So it's really easy to blend these colours. The Caran d'Ache Luminance are so creamy and they blend so nicely together, and you don't really have to work too hard to make them blend really nicely. So I definitely think they're easier to blend than, say, the Prismacolors and especially the Faber-Castell Polychromos. These are really, really easy to blend. So one thing you've got to bear in mind when drawing a mouth is to make sure there's not a harsh line between the top lip, so where the mouth ends and where it meets the skin, because as you can see in the reference photo, it's a very soft transition. You know, there isn't a very harsh outline around her lips, it's just a soft transition of those colours. So make sure that you're just softly transitioning between those colours and merge those colours into each other a bit. So I just went and I did the same with the bottom lip. I just layered those colours. I used the white for the highlights. And now I'm just adding the skin underneath the mouth. So I'm adding that burnt sienna 10%. And I'm also adding some of those burnt ochres and brown ochres. I'm adding the burnt ochre 10% now, and I'm using quite a lot of pressure. And then I just glaze some additional colours over the top. And that's pretty much it. I just used the white pencil for the highlights. But that's basically it for today's tutorial. I hope you found it useful. Like I said, I've left all the materials in the description below, and I'll leave a link to my Patreon if you want to get the longer version. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I'll be doing the skin tutorial next week, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!